Throughout this unit, we are going to be learning about what is cancer. So how is cancer genetically, physically, and behaviorally different from normal cells? How does cancer develop? And how can we treat it? And what can we do to reduce our risk factors of developing cancer? So in this first video, we're going to explore a little bit more about what is cancer and why we're studying it and how it's physically different. So the first thing to note is that cancer is a disease caused by uncontrolled cell division. And that is due to the accumulation of mutations in the cell cycle regulating genes. Cancer is not a one and done disease. We often consider it a disease of old age because it takes time to accumulate the mistakes and shut down all of the controls of the cell cycle that we have learned about previously. Because cancer causes uncontrolled cell division, we see that there will be differences in the tissues that are normal versus cancerous. We can see that the cancer cells are very crowded, they're not uniformly distributed, and they're kind of forming a mass. And we'll learn more about that in a little bit. So why exactly are we learning about cancer? Well, in the world, cancer is the number 2 leading cause of death after cardiovascular disease. And although heart disease can have some genetic components, cancer is a completely genetic disorder. Okay? Its cause is mutations in multiple genes. So in this genetics course, it's important that we understand this because cancer is essentially the ultimate genetic disorder. Now, cancer also will have an effect on many of your lives. I hope this isn't the case, but many of us will know someone, either a family or a friend, who will develop cancer. And my hope is that throughout this unit, you'll gain a better understanding to help yourself or your loved one navigate through the process of a cancer diagnosis and treatment. And also to help you understand how it may be treated better and what new options there are, because we are making progress, although it may be slow. So this graph shows you different types of cancer. You'll notice that cancer is often characterized by the organ in which it affects. So things like lung cancer, colorectal cancer, stomach cancer, liver, breast, pancreatic cancer. So these are cancer deaths in the world. We will see that in the United States, these numbers might slightly be different. There are instances, for example, breast cancer is more common. However, doctors are able to treat it, and so the death rate tends to be a little bit lower for that one, although it still does affect thousands of women and men worldwide each year. So the world is making progress against cancer, but it is slow. And throughout this unit, we're going to learn about the genetic causes and why it makes it difficult to fight and cure. There isn't going to be one set cure for cancer because cancer really is a combination of genetic mutations. We're going to learn about advances being made in diagnosing and treating cancer, along with behaviors that might reduce your risk. So let's start off by talking about how cancer is physically different, and we'll look at that in this video. And then in later videos, we're going to learn about the genetics as well as behaviors that are different. Okay, so cancer cells and normal cells look very different from each other, as we saw in the very first slide of this video. Normal cells tend to be small, they have a uniform nucleus, and they have a large volume of cytoplasm compared to that nucleus. So you can see there's a lot of space. However, in cancer cells, you can see that the nucleus often is kind of odd shaped, as you can see here. Okay? And because it's large and irregular, there's less room for cytoplasm. This often occurs because we're going to learn that cancer rushes through the cell cycle. And so it rushes through interphase when growth normally occurs. It also rushes through the S phase in interphase, which is DNA replication. And as a result, the DNA may not be copied properly. It may be extra chromosomes, there may be missing chromosomes, it may be damaged, and so you have kind of this nucleus that doesn't look normal. The chromatin, or the DNA, in a normal cell is kind of loose, looks a little bit grainy. In a cancer cell, because of all the extra or damaged DNA, it looks very dark and kind of abnormal, clustered, tangled DNA. We're also going to see, besides the physical differences, that cancer, because it's rushing through the process of cell division, may not even fully divide. Okay, normal cells have one nucleus per cell. You can see in this cell right here. Okay, this cell has two nuclei, which can happen if cytokinesis doesn't occur because they're rushing through it. So cancer cells are just really kind of abnormal because of this kind of sped up, uncontrolled cell division. This uncontrolled cell growth leads to the development of a tumor. Now, tumor is an abnormal growth of cells. Not all tumors are cancerous. The word for a non-cancerous tumor is benign. And a benign tumor is going to be a localized tumor, like you can see here. Okay, so it's not cancerous. They grow locally and it's not spreading or invading other tissues. A benign tumor doesn't necessarily have to be a small tumor. Benign tumors can also be large tumors, but the main thing is that they're staying in one place. They are not invading neighboring tissues. Malignant is the word for a cancerous tumor. So mal means bad. Okay, so this is the bad tumor. It's a tumor that invades, and it's going to invade neighboring tissue, which means that it will impair organ function, and potentially, not always, but potentially it could get into the blood supply and travel to another location to establish a new tumor. So when we say cancer spreads, the technical term for that is metastasized. This cancer has metastasized, and some cancers are so invasive that they can metastasize and spread to other locations. So here you can see kind of the extent of different malignant tumors. So this next tumor here, okay, we can see that this benign tumor has become malignant. It's accumulated more mutations, and as a result, it's starting to grow even more abnormally. And you can see that it's starting to break out of the normal layer of, let's see, this is probably epithelial cells, so those are lining cells. And you can see that it's starting to break into maybe this lymph vessel right here, and it's starting to grow into it. Okay, here it's grown even larger, so it's probably accumulated even more mutations, and its behavior is acting even differently. So again, potentially blocking the flow of materials through an organ, such as air or lymph or blood, and so it's causing kind of the organ to not work properly. And then finally we have this severe cancer, and we're going to learn more about the cancer stages later on in this unit. So this would be a high stage cancer, like stage 4 cancer, where we can see that the tumor is so large and it is also vascularized. So you see those red lines, those are blood vessels. And so at this point, it is so invasive that it could potentially get into the blood supply. And you can see those little green cancer cells traveling through the blood. Now, cancer, therefore, can be kind of a range of diseases from non-cancerous benign tumors, okay, to kind of more invasive later stage cancers. Cancers are often classified according to the tissue where they originate. So we looked at the graph earlier that you might have lung cancer or colorectal cancer or things like that. Those are the organs where they're found, but the more scientific way of describing it would be to describe it based on the tissue. So the first type of cancer, and I would just want you to be familiar with these terms in case you hear them in a diagnosis or things like that. The first one is a carcinoma. So carcinomas arrive in epithelial tissues. Okay, epithelial tissues are basically lining tissues. Okay, your skin is an epithelial tissue, like this basal cell carcinoma here. That's skin cancer. Okay, it's a type of skin cancer. Epithelial tissue doesn't just line your skin, it lines all the tubes that run through your body. So your esophagus, okay, your stomach, your intestine, your colon, things like that, as well as your lungs. Your reproductive system is all lined with epithelial cells. So a lot of those cancers, that types that were shown in that graph earlier, like lung cancer or Henrietta Lacks's cervical cancer, those all originated with a lining mutation in those lining cells, those epithelial cells. And that happens because epithelial tissue is exposed usually to environmental conditions, right? So food passes through our digestive tract, and so those epithelial cells get kind of damaged as food passes, or gases travel into our lungs and they cross into the bloodstream across epithelial cells. When we reproduce, okay, our reproductive tract is exposed to different things from our environment. So those are all potential ways that these epithelial cells can get damaged. And when epithelial cells are damaged, they need to be replaced. And every time your body does DNA replication, there's a chance for mistakes. Okay, so the more things have to be replaced, the more likely it is that cancer could potentially develop. And so that's why we see carcinomas in epithelial tissue as being a common form of cancer. Another type of cancer is a sarcoma. Sarcomas give rise in connective tissue. Okay, so there's a lot of different types of connective tissue. They include bones. So you can see this picture here shows 3 different types of bone cancer: osteosarcoma, chondrosarcoma, and Ewing sarcoma. And they are found in bones, but also tendons, cartilage, muscle, and fat can also have sarcomas. Leukemia is cancer of the blood. Leuc is referring to leukocytes, which is another name for blood cells. So leukemia is when the bone marrow, which is if you were to look inside a bone, okay, you have this kind of tissue all on the inside, which is where stem cells are that divide to produce red and white blood cells. So if there's a mutation in those cells in your bone marrow, they will divide and produce abnormal blood cells, whether they're red blood cells or white blood cells. But when those blood cells are abnormal, okay, that can lead to cancer, which is leukemia. Now, you have another system of fluid that runs through your body. Okay, so blood runs through your body to deliver food and oxygen to your cells. You also have something called your lymphatic system. So surrounding all of your cells, so whenever you have a cell in a tissue, okay, there's liquid all around it. Okay, so there's some liquid. And that liquid is called the extracellular fluid. Okay, and that fluid that surrounds your cells and keeps them moist, okay, it needs to be kind of cleaned and purified as well. And so that's the job of your lymphatic system. It kind of helps move around body fluids. So not blood, but just the other liquids that are in your body. And so your lymphatic system kind of cleans up that extracellular fluid. And it does that mainly because that's where a lot of your immune system cells are working. So we're going to learn about things like B cells and macrophages. That's where they work. And so debris builds up as your body kind of breaks down any germs or any type of materials might build up. And so your lymphatic system kind of filters that. So you have lymph nodes throughout your body, and you can think about it, right? When you're sick, the lymph nodes kind of swell. That means that they're filtering more because your immune system is working more in that extracellular fluid. And so here you can see this is like a lymph node that's swollen and cancerous. Okay, and in that lymph node, there are a variety of abnormally shaped cells. Because lymph nodes are filtering, okay, cancer cells that are traveling through your body might get stuck. And so lymph nodes are often the second place a tumor develops. So it'll develop in a main organ, such as a breast tumor, or in your kidneys or things like that. And then it spreads to your lymph nodes from there, because it's filtering out, and these cancer cells could break off and be filtered. So we'll learn more about that as we go. This just gives you hopefully a better idea of what cancer is and some types of cancer. We're now going to explore the genetics of cancer.